Happy Thursday, socialites. Welcome to the 42 Social Club, the best damn social club in the universe. I am your host, Jedi ASU, and thank you so much for spending a portion of your evening with me and my guest, Shane Dale. And we're going to go ahead and talk about the history of the Territorial Cup and what to expect tomorrow during tomorrow's game. So, as always, make sure you pour yourself a drink, sit back, relax, and let's get social. It is Thursday, the 10th of December in 2020, the year of our COVID. Hopefully, you are doing well, taking care of yourself, and especially everyone around you. I'm beginning to get a lot of reports about number of friends catching COVID-19. And so, as always, make sure you are extra diligent in everything that you are doing. But let's go ahead and jump into the conversation with my guest, Shane Dale. How are you, my friend? Lovely to see you again.
Jedi doing great. Always good to catch up with you, especially on the eve of the 94th Territorial Cup matchup.
It's actually going to be, as always, it's going to be something. We don't know what it's going to be. It's
Like this
always a
season,
short.
is it really even a season this year? Who knows?
You know, and to your point, I kind of had that in my preview yesterday. I wasn't sure. I mean, I'm so high strung that I'm like into it, and so I want them to do well. But you're right. It's like, is it really just one big fat spring, season
Yeah.
that doesn't count for anything? But first of all, congratulations that you just released your second book, right? And it's Rich Rod versus Graham. Am I getting that order correct?
You are?
Excellent, good. And so that one is, again, I loved it. I did get a chance to read it, and the formatting of it is brilliant. So everyone, if you're able to get a copy, where can they get a copy at to begin with, Shane?
So as of now, the only place to get it, you can pre-order on Amazon, but if you want it now, you want it before by Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever you happen to celebrate, Mascot Books
Okay.
is the place to go. Mascotbooks.com/richrod versus Graham. They were nice enough to make a URL friendly for everyone so you can find it easily. Mascotbooks.com/richrod versus Graham is the place to get it. It'll be available on Amazon in a couple months.
Okay.
Just the way the whole the wholesale versus retail thing goes. That's all over my head. But this is what I was told. So if you want to get it now, you can go there. If not, you want to wait a couple months to get it off Amazon and get that sweet Amazon Prime shipping, then you can wait a couple months and you'll be able to do that.
But it's a brilliant book, and thank you for sharing that. Right, because again, as I read it, we were talking about this. The first game I read about was the 16 game. The I think we were talking about that one right before we were
That was the
pre-gaming.
first one you chose as an ASU fan
I
to read about.
I had to. I mean, I think it's always one. It's like also talking about like the Chuck Cecil pick six. It's just like I kind of like go to it just so like I can deal with the pain and then move on. And
Get it
so
out of the way.
exactly, but
Rip off the Band-Aid.
it was, and I think that the way you wrote it was brilliant, right? Because you definitely accounted for not only the back and forth between what ASU and the Wildcats were doing, but also just detailing, you know, the focus of both teams, right? And really, especially on the part of Rich Rod, how he was focused and what he was doing, right? And so, how did that conversation go for the 16? I know 14 was when they won the South, but
Mhm.
how did the conversation for the 16 game go?
You're talking about for Rich Rod or Graham or for
Rich
both?
Rod, Rich Rod
Rich
first.
Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was kind of reminiscent of it's funny how just about every game reminds you of a previous game in the rivalry. And I think the 16 game, there have been a lot of upsets in the rivalry, and traditionally it's an Arizona team upsetting a better ASU team simply because in an average year, ASU is typically the better team. They have a better football program. I'm a Wildcat, but I'm fine with admitting that because it's the truth. But the 16 game, everything went horribly wrong for Arizona. They had the death of a teammate before the season. They
Hmm.
had their field got flooded. They only had the outdoor practice field at the time, and
Oh, right.
the Cardinals opened their facility in Tempe, a few miles away from Sun Devil Stadium, for them to practice.
Right.
They had one injury after the next. They were 0-8 in the Pac-12. So, like a lot of other games in Arizona ASU history, Arizona sort of looked at this as their bowl game. It's like,
Right.
here's a way to not cover up everything that happened in our season, but at least send the seniors out on the right note. And Rich
Hmm.
Rodriguez, every coach is big on sending the seniors out right, but he really is big on that. And he had a lot of 4-year players there. This was his fifth season, so all of his seniors were guys he had been with the whole time,
Oh,
unless they
okay.
transferred. Uh, and so that was the big message: is okay, we can at least remove some of the stain of the season
Right.
by and we just talked. In fact, we just talked to him on our podcast a couple of
Yes.
days ago. I do a U of A podcast, And we talked about that game and said, basically, we ran the same play 25 times in the second half. The famous they didn't flip the ball in the second half and won the
Right.
game. They even during the book, when I wrote the book, he said, we did a super secret play we called a huddle
Yes.
on
Go
that
ahead.
game because they're worried about Todd Graham and ASU stealing their signals and all that stuff, and so you had that subplot as well. So it was a classic. Okay, let's end our season on the high note. Let's reclaim the cup. Let's send the seniors out the right way. And it was. I obviously, if you're an ASU fan, you have a different perspective, but I think you can appreciate, a guy like Jacob Alsadek, one of their offensive linemen at U of
Right.
A. You said, basically he fell in love with football again in that
Yes.
game, and that's what happens a lot, regardless of what side. If you had a tough season, you win that game, whether you're ASU or U of A, it makes you feel good. And sometimes I think it's a big sigh of relief more than anything else,
Right.
right? Especially on the ASU side, it's like the indignity of losing to the Wildcats. Thank goodness we don't have to deal with that again for another year. So,
Right.
but no, Rich Rod, I'll tell you what, both coaches were great with their time, and Rich
Wonderful.
Rodriguez, the way things ended at Arizona, he could have not returned my call, but he did.
Yeah.
And he talked to me, and then he picked up the phone again when I had follow-up questions. He's been on our podcast a couple of times. He still lives in Tucson. His son Rhett
Oh,
still
does
goes to
he?
U of A.
Okay.
He does. Well, and his son's still going to U of A. He's the quarterback there.
Right.
Rhett Rodriguez. He actually got a start a couple of years ago. So they're still in Tucson. They still, despite the way things ended, they still love the university. But
And they're
Rich Rod
still
was great.
around. That's
Yeah,
good.
Rich Rod was great to talk to, and Todd Graham was fantastic as well. Both guys were very generous for their time.
That's excellent. And I think that's like to your point, right? It's like the previous the year's win is a reflection of the previous year, right? Where in I guess it was 15 up in Tempe, it was a tight back and forth up until, like you said, I think it was towards the end, and there was those two pick sixes. I think they were only down 7, I think is what it was.
ASU was ahead almost the entire game. They were up 21 at halftime, I
Okay.
remember. And Arizona kept it close. They got within 8 a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Dawkins came in as their third string quarterback and came in and did
Yes.
pretty well. And they had a chance to tie with about 4 minutes left, and then they had the back-to-back pick sixes to seal it. But that was one of those rare games where I felt like both teams' fans felt pretty good after. ASU, obviously, because they reclaimed the cup,
Right.
and U of A because they had so many injuries, including Anu Solomon, who was out for that game. They thought, okay, well, it was a good effort in Tempe, even though we lost, which
Right.
typically we don't feel that way.
Yeah. It's the moral
but-
victory conversation.
Yeah, well, I don't know if they consider it a moral victory, but
Okay.
they're like, you know what? We did the best under tough circumstances.
Okay. Got it. And then obviously, the final one, I mean, it's reading the first one was good, right? Because it just kind of laid the groundwork of how, they were both new to the rivalry and everything else. But reading the last one, which was interesting because the last chapter of the rivalry, right? Because there was this overtone of on what was going to happen, especially more so with Graham than it was with Rodriguez, right? There was more precarious position of him in that last season. And so did Coach Graham kind of talk of that season any differently, now that he's looked back or he went through it? I mean, I've seen some interviews, but what did he share when you interviewed him about that last season?
The last season in the 2017 game is what you're talking about?
Yeah, the 2017 game.
2017 game. No, I don't think so. I think I've told many people, no one's better at remembering and appreciating Todd Graham's accomplishments than Todd Graham is. Yeah, he can. I love. I mean, he's very generous with his time. I really
Right.
appreciate it. He can remember specific stats, specific numbers as far as we won this game this year, we won this many games in the Pac-12 in 2015, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And he noted fairly that ASU won 6 games in the Pac-12 that year, and they weren't supposed to. They weren't supposed to be that good.
Right.
And so he felt like they did enough to turn things around. And he said that he felt that the 2018 team that he would have coached the following year
Yes.
was going to be their best team yet, which is saying a lot, considering that the 2013 team won the Pac-12 South. Now, he also said that the 2017 game was a big win because Arizona was favored by double digits. They weren't.
Right.
They were favored by 2 points. So I'm just Todd Graham remembers certain
that's
things.
That's 2 digits, 1 and 1.
1 and 1, yeah. But I mean, it was still an upset, and obviously, Colte gets hurt, before halftime, and that changes the complexity of the game. But what I really got out of it by talking, not so much to him, but I'll tell you, one of the best interviews for the book was Tim Healy, the play-by-play guy at ASU. Had a wealth of information. He and then Brian Jeffries, his counterpart at U of A.
Yes.
They had the kind of access to the coaches that most media didn't get.
Okay.
And had that kind of that relationship because they were, they're on the same side more or less.
Right.
And Tim Ely said, going back to the 2016 game, he really felt like that was the beginning of the end for Todd Graham.
Oh, got
That
it.
was when Ray Anderson really decided he was going to make a change, unless ASU had an incredible 2017. I
Right.
still remember being on the sideline at the end of that 2016 game because if you're a member of the press, you can go down the last few
Yes.
minutes and looking at Ray Anderson, who was a few feet away, you could just fry an egg on his head. He just looked pissed. He was not happy.
Yeah.
I mean, especially because ASU they'd lost. It was going to be their sixth straight loss. They
Hmm.
started the year 5-1, and then they lose
Oh,
to a
right.
winless Arizona, a team that's winless in the conference in Arizona, your arch rival, by 21 points in, if you're an ASU fan, embarrassing fashion. It just was.
Right. Exactly.
So it seemed like the 2017 season didn't really put the nail in the coffin. It was the year before that that really did.
That was really doing it. And then I think it's that whole last season of 17, right, leading up to him being let go right after the Territorial Cup. I mean, even then, there was always talk about it being mid-season, right? They were actually, I think, from what I heard, they were ready to actually drop the hammer right after Washington,
I heard
right?
the same as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. It's like they're like, okay, and then so then he never would have had the chance to actually coach in that last Territorial Cup. But it's just, I think, I guess it was more bewilderment on the part of Ray Anderson than you know,
Yeah, what's
even
interesting is
rage.
Demario Richard, who I interviewed for the book as well. He was under the impression, from what he told me, that if ASU beat U of A
Hmm.
that year in 2017, which they did, that Todd Graham would get to keep his job. Now, I didn't hear that from any other player, so I don't know.
Interesting,
I mean, and obviously that wasn't true because they let him go the next day.
right?
And I remember there was a report from USA Today before the game that he was going to be let go, so it wasn't a shock.
Yeah,
But
how
that
they
was kind
got
of
that
interesting.
scoop, which is crazy.
Yeah, yeah. But and Todd Graham, I even asked him, it's like, when did you find out? And he said it was the next day. So even though the writing may have been on the wall, and even though he may have been told before then, he says he didn't find out until the news broke the next day.
Gotcha, exactly. And so, and to the, I mean, I shared this with you already, and everyone that's watching and gets to see this on replay. The player and team interviews you have are absolutely brilliant. I mean, actually being able to get accounts from so many different players on both sides has been just it makes it a pleasure to read, right? Because you're hearing the player accounts and their feelings and their emotions. Even then, it like you were sharing about that one, the one kid on the O line. He loved football after that, and that was
Yeah.
actually brilliant. A testament to how you're writing it, right? Because again, you're very fair in the story. You're able to get an understanding of what happened. That's why I think that's why I was so excited to read 16, having read your first book, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go to probably one of the more darker losses in ASU history and
Yeah.
read the accounting, right? Because again, we know how horrific was on TV. It didn't now. So again, many kudos to you. Question for you: when I was in the article, in the chapter, I should say, there was some feedback from the ASU players that they were just not in the right spot. Some of them had said they just kind of like, nah, we just want to end the season. Is that I believe that's one of the quotes in the book, right?
Yeah, more or less. I think what happened was, and Todd Graham even talked about this because one of the reasons why, I'm sure you've heard the same thing, Jedi. One of the reasons why ASU decided to make a change was just because Todd Graham he was a difficult guy to work for.
Yes.
He demanded a lot, and he had some success doing that. But he
Hmm.
was, he had a lot of assistants come and go, and some of that was because of promotions. But
Right.
it was a bit of a revolving door with him. And
Yes.
I talked to DJ Calhoun, who was very upfront and said there were arguments that season because going into that season, Todd Graham sort of gave up the play calling of the defense to
Right.
Keith Patterson, which is something he hadn't done before. And he even talked about, Todd Graham did to me, that he regretted doing that.
Mm.
He regretted giving up control because I guess he said a lot of people were in his ear talking about, well, you need to go do this. You need to go talk to alumni. You need to go, talk at this meeting or
Hmm.
or do this presentation or whatever. You have too much on your plate. You need to look at, which is probably true, but it's
Right.
something he regrets. And so he thinks that if he had retained control of the defense, that things would have turned out differently. And then he had DJ Calhoun said there were arguments on the sideline, between Todd Graham and some of the members of the coaching staff, including
Mm.
Keith Patterson, about what scheme to run or what how
Right.
to execute the game plan. And so That's one of the reasons why I think you saw ASU not only lose 6 straight games to end that season, but end up it was one of the rare, maybe the only time where ASU was not up for that game because Todd Graham made such a big deal about that game.
Yeah.
He always did. He had the
Hmm.
countdown clock in the locker room. He'd have former players come back and talk to the team.
Right.
He'd do all kinds of stuff that Rich Rodriguez, at least at first, wouldn't do. But so it was unfathomable to me to see ASU not up for that game when Todd Graham always made such a big deal out of it. And that told you that something was
Absolutely.
terribly wrong.
Yeah, everywhere, top to bottom, right? Not only the players, but also with the staff. And that's again, you could. It's always something that gets revealed afterwards, right? You can always
Mhm.
feel about it, and that's everything else. But with Coach Rodriguez, right? I was just kind of going through and thinking about, was his first win the 14 game when he won the South?
Mhm.
So
Yep.
then I guess what were his emotions with that one? Was it more of getting the monkey off his back, or was it more focus on this, or what was it? Just a gamut of stuff.
Well, Rich Rodriguez didn't talk about this a lot, but I think, well, he did in terms of Todd Graham and Rich Rodriguez took two different approaches to this rivalry. Todd Graham took the approach of we're going to make as big a deal out of this as we possibly can.
Okay.
Rich Rodriguez took the approach of he didn't. It's not they didn't make a big deal out of it. I think he thought, okay, if I emphasize this game all year and do everything that ASU is doing, it's going to make the play. It's going to put too much pressure on the players.
Okay.
And I think that was more of his attitude. But it seems like going into that third year after they lost in 2012 and 13, and I think Rich Rodriguez took that personally because of the relationship or lack thereof
Mm-hmm.
with Todd Graham back to their coaching days
Right.
together. That he changed his approach a little bit.
Okay.
Like Brian Jeffries, the radio guy at U of A, said he started referring to ASU as that team up north.
Ah, okay.
Which is common, obviously. Both schools do that.
Right.
The team down south and the team up north. But
Of
Rich
course.
Rodriguez sort of gained that, picked up the lingo a little bit more, and so he
Good.
maybe started emphasizing it a little bit more. Now, I don't know if that really mattered going into 2014 because it was such a big game already,
Right.
and we learned in the fourth quarter that it was for the South. We didn't know going in
Yeah, exactly. It
because
wasn't
UCLA had to
determined.
lose to Stanford, but we knew going in. So I think, and from what Rich Rodriguez told me, he didn't know until the last minute of that game,
Right.
with the clock ticking down, and they took a knee that UCLA had lost. He didn't want any announcements. He didn't want
Yes.
anyone to. He didn't want any announcements throughout the stadium, and there weren't any.
Right.
So I think that it certainly added to it. The fact that he got his first win against ASU while beating the South. I didn't necessarily ask him like what was more important, but
Okay.
I think, I mean, it was easily both. He was able to
Right.
celebrate on the field with his family. The fans were rushing the field, and he was, it was, he was on his way. At least it looked like at that point to accomplishing what he set out to accomplish when he had his introductory press conference and said, "Why not Arizona?" That
Right.
was, they were getting there. At least at that point, things didn't go as well the rest of the way, but he definitely took the rivalry seriously. I just think it was two different approaches. Todd
Okay.
Graham was like, "Let's make a huge deal out of this. Let's put the countdown clock on the wall. Let's remind him of this game constantly."
Right.
Rich Rodriguez was like, "Well, yeah, it's a big game, but we have other games we have to play, and I don't want to put too much pressure on these guys."
That's fair, right? Focusing on the last game at the beginning of the season is definitely not it's not, it's a distraction, right? It's kind of like
And I agree, and I understand the approach, but to be fair, there's something to that. Like Dick told me when he was U of A's head coach, and he continued the streak against ASU in the '80s.
right.
His, he had like a list of three goals before the season for every U of A player. I don't remember the other two, but the last one was beat ASU. He picked up that mantle from
Right.
Larry Smith before him.
Yes.
So there is something to it, even though it sounds like such a cliche, that the team that makes a bigger deal out of it and wants it more, however you want to put it, tends to do better in this rivalry overall. Not necessarily in one given year, but in the
Right.
grand scheme of things, the coach that seems to make a bigger deal out of this game typically has more success.
Absolutely. And speaking of, Coach Smith and everyone else, right? Going back to your first book, right? You kind of chronicle everything up until, right, the Rich Rod Graham
Mhm.
era,
Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
so, I have this game, I have this I can't remember which Territorial Cup it is, but it's in Tempe, and Brian McCabe is interviewing Coach Cush and Coach Smith, and they're kind of recollecting back and forth about how they're doing. And I think I can't remember if Coach Cush punched Coach Smith or Kevin McCabe on the shoulder, but it was one of those things where it's like if you didn't get a punch from Coach Cush, it's like the ultimate term of endearment. But anyway, um, it was. Did you get to talk to Coach Smith before he passed? or did
I
he?
didn't,
No.
unfortunately. He passed
Okay.
quite a while beforehand. I
Before
did
you
talk
wrote
to
the.
Frank Kush though,
Okay. Right.
and I'll tell you what, I got to talk to him while he had an office at ASU. Still, it was like
Right
2011
on.
or so, about a half hour conversation. Leaving that room, I never had sweatier pits. The guy he's just like a walking intimidator. It's like you don't
Yes.
have to, he doesn't have to do anything. He's just one of those guys, you're in his presence. It's intimidating. Kind of like Lute Olson, I would say at U of A. He was the
Fair.
same.
Yeah.
But he was a great interview. I mean, I wasn't going to ask him about every single game he coached in against U of A.
Right.
I mean, he was 80 something years old at the time, and he coached a bunch of them, but got a lot of great info from him. I wish I had a chance to talk to Larry Smith. Unfortunately, we didn't obviously have that
Yeah.
opportunity.
I was living in Tucson when he was coaching down there, so I remember all those years, and I remember the uproar when he left and everything
Yep.
else. So, but I think you're absolutely both Coach and Coach Olson both did have that aura to them, right? And so,
Yep.
did you get to interview Coach Olson a lot while you were in any of your coverage,
I
or
didn't get to talk to him a lot. When I was at U of A, writing for the school paper, I got to go to a couple of the men's games,
okay,
and even that, just being in the press conference, it's like guy's just larger in life. And I know he was a very old school kind of guy. You'd say yes sir, no sir, and all that. He'd always
okay,
dress formally, and Frank Kush obviously was a very old school guy as well. And
right,
but he said, I treated everyone equally as an equally bad. He didn't care where you came from. He didn't care what you accomplished in high school.
right,
He'd whip you into shape, and sometimes like physically as well, and some stuff you can't do now. But yeah,
definitely.
he was as old school as they get.
Exactly. And so, referring back, and again, it's to Territorial is the name of your first book,
Hmm.
right? That one's still available on Amazon.
Yep.
Yep. And so everyone definitely grab that one as well, because again, that's a brilliant read, giving you, a history of a rivalry that we appreciate. I think I understand is maybe it's credited that you're the only one that's actually written a book on this rivalry, correct?
Exclusively on it, yes. I did. I researched and sourced a couple of other books. There's the Maroon and Gold by Bob Eager is
Okay.
a great resource. For that first book, highly recommended for an ASU fan.
Okay.
I'm guessing a lot of UVA fans aren't watching this, but They Fought Like Wildcats is a great book by Abe
Okay.
Chan. He's written in '79. A lot of good early history, not exclusively. Neither of those were exclusively about the rivalry, but a lot of good nuggets in there,
Right
along
on.
with the newspaper archives going way back. So, but yeah, as far as the only one exclusively on, that's why I wrote it. I wanted there to be a book dedicated specifically to this rivalry. It's
Absolutely.
underrated. It's unique in so many different ways, including the Territorial Cup itself. And I wanted to make sure it got its just due.
Now, have you been interviewed from other parts of the country talking about this? And some people are like, "Oh, I didn't realize that," or "Yes, it's underrated."
After I wrote the first book, I got a couple like national like radio or podcast interviews. There have been a couple of write ups I've seen where people have like quoted the book. Like some of the
Hmm.
more underrated, under the radar rivalries and
Right.
some of the crazier stories, and so I've seen a couple of those things. But yeah, and you've seen it, like you saw it just last Saturday, Jedi. The ASU scores and they play the UVA fight song on Fox. People still get the
Yeah.
two schools can do,
Still.
and I got flack myself when I was at ABC 15 in Phoenix when we did a story on a UVA basketball player and the super red still he's still committed to ASU, which to be fair, I did
Oh.
not write that super,
Yeah.
but of
You were you,
course,
you weren't
I get
responsible
I
for
get
the
the brunt of it.
graphic, but you
So
were on screen.
so it happens. It happens. People get the two schools confused, and I think everyone out of the state, most people who have never stepped foot in Arizona or don't know much about the rivalry, just assume that, well, it's an in-state rivalry. Pretty much all there is to it. Just like
Right.
any other. There's so much off-field history that I'm sure you know about that we could talk
Hmm.
about more if we wanted to. There's the
Please.
territory itself. So there's so many little nuggets that make this rivalry unique, geographically,
Right.
politically, the political differences between Maricopa and Pima counties, that plays into it as
Absolutely.
well.
Prop
The fact
200.
that Tucson used to be the hub of the state and now Phoenix Tempe is. So there's so many things that go into this rivalry. And one of the things that I know you saw, if you read, I know you read Richard versus Graham already, is there were two separate studies, nationwide studies. What's the most intense rivalry in the country?
Yes.
And both of them, very different methodologies. Both of them came to the same conclusion that Arizona State is number one. And in the case of one study, the most intense rival, not just in college football, but in all of pro sports in America. And one of the big reasons for that is not just some of the stuff we just talked about,
Right.
but because Arizona and ASU were kind of on an island in this state in terms of FBS schools.
Yes.
There's no other natural rival close by. Arizona is a huge state, and you have to go at least 5 or 6 hours in any direction to find another FBS school.
Right.
So you have that natural rival, and so that one study I cited that had the most intense rivalry in the country, they basically had they interviewed thousands of fans across the country and gave them all 100 points to allocate. Here,
Okay.
allocate this toward your rival. To as many teams as you want. You could all allocate all 100 points toward
Oh,
one.
interesting.
You could allocate all 100 points toward one team, or you could spread them out. And so, like Michigan, Ohio State, that's a huge rivalry. That's a bigger national rivalry, obviously, than Arizona ASU. But Michigan, for example, also has Michigan State.
Yes.
I think every Big Ten game has a rivalry trophy, right?
They do.
So
Absolutely.
right, and then Alabama has Auburn, but they also have LSU. They have a lot of other SEC teams.
Absolutely.
Arizona is focused exclusively on ASU and vice versa. And so that focus,
Yeah.
it's like that's why this game means so much because, okay, well, it's like if you're Oklahoma, okay, we lost to Texas, we beat Oklahoma State,
Right.
so at least we're 1-1 in rivalry games. Either you're ahead in the rivalry or you're behind in this rivalry. There's no middle ground. There's no, well, at least we beat this team. No, if you lost to ASU or you lost to U of A, you got to hear about it for the next year. And there's no like making up for that by beating another team. And I think that's
Exactly.
one of the things that makes this rivalry unique.
I think that's a brilliant point that you're saying. Like the way other teams have, like all the Big Ten, every single matchup has some sort of trophy,
Yeah.
right? And there's Equity Bruin and J Pop on Twitter are trying to make the Utah ASU thing, the unholy war, right? A rivalry, a thing as well. But is there a team? Is there a team that Arizona calls a rival? Other than, because again, this comes back to the intensity of the rivalry, right? There's no one else the two Arizona schools want to get after, but is there a burgeoning rivalry that
In
Arizona
football,
has?
no.
In football,
In
okay.
basketball, I would think that you've asked most U of A fans, they would say traditionally their biggest rival is UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
They had some great matchups, and even Stanford as well. But I think
Yes. Man,
they've had
those Stanford matchups back in the 80s and 90s were just
with Lou Dolson, not David Montgomery. He's on my fantasy team. Uh,
Mike Montgomery.
Mike Montgomery, thank you, the former coach of Stanford. They had some great matches, but I really think Arizona, UCLA, because they're traditionally up until recently, obviously, the top two teams in the Pac-10/Pac-12 for so long.
Right.
They had so many great top 10, top 20 battles, but in football,
no one.
I don't think so. I don't think you can make a case for any other team being close.
I agree. I think, and again, I think they're like these other peripheral rivalries are fun, but I just don't see anything else that tops, the Territorial Cup.
Arizona has a fun time upsetting Oregon every so often, but that's really that's the only other close thing I would say.
And that was the whole thing of the Graham era that chapped my ass, and I was pretty vocal about this as well. Is that Rich Rod was able to get after Oregon ranked in Autzen and in Tucson, and that was just a brilliant thing. Where, I don't think it took Graham a while. I think he only got them once, and it was in Tempe. Right, it was never up in Autzen. I don't think we've won in Autzen since 2004 or 2002.
Was that right?
Yeah, so
there was one game in particular though that I think that went to multiple overtimes, and ASU got screwed on the call there in one of those overtimes.
It was a Frank Darby 2-point conversion.
That's right.
So that was it. And so that was the other thing. The other thing too, from a rivalry perspective in basketball, is I get an inordinate amount of tweets from Oregon fans when Arizona loses. I don't know. Maybe it's just because they're just trying to.
That might be a blooming rivalry as well, because Oregon's become very good at basketball over the years. So maybe that's part of it. And then I remember after that ESPN story that came out, which I think is proven to be bogus about DeAndre Ayton taking $100,000. That next day, Sean Miller's not on the court, and DeAndre Ayton's got to hear all kinds of crap from fans in Eugene, all kinds of signs there. So, yeah, I think it's a bit personal there. And the fact that Oregon got to the Final Four, whereas Arizona hasn't been in a long time. So, yeah, in basketball, I would say Arizona maybe has a few more rivals, but I mean, certainly ASU is up there now. I mean, it's not like Lou Olson days when they, I think Arizona won 23 out of 24 against ASU. I mean, ASU is a better basketball team this year, at least on the men's side. It's like it's flipped. The women's team is better on the U of A side.
Your women's team is brilliant this year. It's very cool.
I'll tell you, it'd be crazy. They got to the Final Four before Sean Miller did, but it could really happen this season.
It looks like they could. I mean, your name of the coach? The women's.
Adia Barnes. She used to play down at U of A and is
She
arguably
did,
the
right?
best player in U of A women's basketball history as well.
And
She's done a fantastic job.
she seems to be recruiting lights out. Impressive
Hmm.
recruiting, right? I mean, obviously, I
But
love.
yeah, but Bobby Hurley on the men's side. I mean, it's like I said, it's kind of flipped. I mean, ASU is definitely a contender to win the Pac-12 in men's basketball, whereas Arizona, we don't know what they have, and are they going to be playing in the tournament? Are they going to be allowed to play in the tournament? We still have that
Uh,
cloud over their head as well. So,
you think that's
uh,
still good? That's still something that'll happen, even though the ESPN story isn't proving
oh
out.
yeah,
Okay.
and I think so because they have a bunch of level one violations
Mm.
they've been accused of. So they're going to this independent council. So we'll see what happens. But I can't imagine anything less than at least a 1 year tournament ban based on what
Okay.
Oklahoma State got. So that's
Oh, I
probably
see what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah. So all this to say that it's a crazy time because I think ASU men's basketball is definitely up right now, and U of A is in limbo at best. And ASU is definitely I don't know how good they are just yet, but they could make a deep run in the tournament if they get healthy.
That's what some people were saying, that you have the talent. Well, you always have the talent. It's just a matter of, are you able to pull it together?
Hmm.
Is that the issue? Is that it's just a matter of putting it together this year?
Well, on the ASU side.
No, on
On the
the
U,
U
well,
Arizona
U of
side.
A, it's impossible to know what they have just yet. I mean, they've looked pretty good their last couple of games, but they have
Okay.
so many new faces. They have one of their recruits from overseas, Kirk Risa, is not eligible yet because of some sort of NCAA
Oh,
clearinghouse issue. So it's hard to say, but I think ASU with Remy Martin coming back and Alonzo Verge coming back, and then you add
right.
Christopher and Bagley on top of that. I mean they're a Pac-12 contender, and they may be. I don't know if they're a Final Four contender, but Sweet 16 at least. You would have to think if they're healthy.
That would be brilliant to see, and it's always exciting to talk about ASU being a basketball school. And I think we've talked about this one too, and I think we've I would love for this to be like a Tobacco Road, right? Between U Arizona and ASU, the way like Duke and all the other in UNC, right? Being the West
Yeah,
Coast edition of that would be brilliant. So hopefully, as we get to see all that.
absolutely.
But back to your first book, right? Just so everyone, it's Shane Dale again. He is here. Follow him, Shane Dale, Arizona AZ on Twitter. Does the book have a social media, anything, or is everything just through your account?
I have a Facebook page called. Well, also started the website called Territorial Sports.
Okay.
I'm
Yep.
sort of phasing that out. I don't. I think we're going to focus more on the U of A side of things for my podcast. But
Okay.
you go to Facebook. You go to facebook.com/the Territorial Cup. You can find more info on the books there and some Territorial Cup history. I put together a couple things on my opinion, the top 10 games in the history of the rivalry,
Right on.
just overall, not from one team or the other's perspective, but just the top 10 games, some of the most controversial moments. So you go there, you can learn more about the book and some hopefully some Territorial Cup nuggets you might not have known.
Are there any outtakes from that did make the book that you're putting in there, or is that what's kind of what you're putting there right now?
No, I actually thought about that. I haven't gotten around to doing it. It'd be kind of cool, I think, to do because there's a lot of stuff that I didn't put in there.
Okay.
Like some stuff that maybe just didn't fit, or just it's like sort of like like a movie. You cut stuff for time. Just I
Right.
cut stuff for. I didn't want to make things too wordy. I told you before we started recording. It's my wife told me that my first book kind of read like a textbook, and so I tried to make this one a
Right.
little bit breezier with more photos. And if you're reading it, there's a good chance you remember what happened in each game.
Yes.
So I didn't want to go into, okay, well, here's what happened on second and three in the second quarter.
Right.
I wanted to go over the important things and really let the players tell their stories, get some behind the scenes stuff. Here's what happened after the game. Here's what happened before. Here's what was going through my mind when I scored this big touchdown. A lot of
Right.
those fun stuff things that have never been told publicly before is what I really wanted to try to do.
I think that, and again, it really translates well. You really get a feel for that, and again, it's beautiful storytelling in the book. So that's again, it's very easy to read. And like you said, even then, having watched them or even having been there, right, going through that and everything else is just it's a great accounting. It's excellent
Appreciate that.
accounting.
Thank
No,
you.
absolutely. And so back to your first book, I did have another for one of your. I'll ask you kind of this question of both, but we'll ask of the first one. What was one of your favorite stories from the ASU side and then from the U Arizona side in your first book that you still enjoy?
Yeah, I was actually just on a radio show in Tucson yesterday, and I mentioned this one that the Chuck Cecil play that I
Okay.
think we talked about in '86. I know it's not going to be popular on your show, but I bring it up because I got to talk to both Chuck Cecil and the guy who threw the pass, Jeff Van Raphorst,
Right.
and I got both of their accountings of that play and like what was going through their minds
Right.
and all that. And then Jeff Van Raphorst, he had like, after his football career was done, he had like regular kind of everyday job as I forget exactly what he was doing, but he told me that like he had a presentation to give and he had like a PowerPoint presentation ready, and he opens up the file, and instead of the presentation playing, it's the video of that play. His
Uh,
coworkers pranked him, and so like the first thing you hear is
right.
Vern Lundquist, races on. This is Chuck Cecil, and so they pranked him and put that in there. So that's the kind of stuff that's kind of fun. It's like if you
Right.
like you said, if you're reading it, there's a good chance you remember what happened. You were either there, or you watched it on TV.
Right.
But here's what Jeff Van Raphorst was thinking. Here's what Chuck Cecil was thinking. Here's a fun anecdote after the game. So I got things like that from there, and then
Right.
just getting their perspectives on like what was going through your mind before a big last second kick.
Okay.
What was going through your mind, like Nick Wilson when he scored touchdown against ASU in 2014, a big long touchdown run. He said he almost came out of his shoes, and then he was watching himself on the big screen at Arizona Stadium, and he almost tripped himself up because he was so
That's
focused on
right.
that
He was watching the big screen.
because he thought someone. Well, he wanted to see if someone was behind him because he didn't want to look back.
Oh, gotcha.
He's trying to keep by looking at the big screen. So it's that kind of fun stuff where we try to get some stuff that even if you're a diehard fan, you might not already know.
Exactly. And I think that's why it's again such a great read, because regardless of what side you're on, there's a history that you absolutely have to appreciate because we're in it, right?
Yeah.
And it is truly, it's gonna get its due. Your effort in making it visible to everyone is definitely part of it. And so that's why I'm grateful to be able to not only share this with everyone, but just being able to talk to you and, you know,
I
dive more
appreciate
into this.
Yeah. Appreciate the
Absolutely.
time.
And then
I
so
was part of the first ever I think I was the only Wildcat at your first Sun Devil Summit, I think, back
you are
way
a
back.
founding member. So if everyone
I was grandfathered in, so I've never forgotten. I appreciate that.
no, we appreciate you being there as well. And so your favorite story on the new book, right? Was that the 2014 game that you were sharing, or was there another story that you
Well, let me
liked in
try to
there?
think of an ASU one since this is an ASU. I'm trying to think. I remember the one that comes to my head was DJ Foster. Had a great 4-year career at ASU, and then
Mhm.
his last year he was converted to a wide receiver.
Right.
He was not crazy about that move. Things didn't go very well. But that last game against Arizona, he was used primarily as a running back, and he
Right.
got to score a fourth quarter touchdown to seal Arizona, or to seal help seal ASU's win.
Yes.
Just that feeling of being able to kind of do what he does best, do it against Arizona after losing to them the year before. Because you remember DJ Foster and Mike Bercovici and Jordan Simone, all those guys were seniors. They wrote that open letter before the season called The Grind
Yes.
about, and the last thing they mentioned in that is we're going to reclaim the Territorial Cup this year. And so
Right.
then being able to do that, and then like both Jordan Simone and Mike Bercovici said one of their favorite moments from that game was DJ Foster being able to score and sort of end his career at ASU
Right.
the right way. So that was fun. And DJ was a great interview, because he had 4
That's cool.
games. We talked about all of them. He was the MVP of the 2013 game,
Hmm.
and then the 2015 game he kind of got back to what he was doing best, and maybe he was sort of falling in love with football again himself.
Right.
So that was fun. I'm sure if I had more time to think about it, I could think of some others, but that's just one that comes to mind.
That's excellent. Good. And so the one that everyone's been talking about lately is one of the more recent games is the 2018 game, right? So were you there? You were there for that
Mhm.
game, right? So you were there, you were
It
covering,
was.
and you were able to work through that. And so one of the things I was thinking is like an oral history, right, of all that. So just being able to kind of write up a full description as to how it went, right? Um, were you able to interview players from both sides, or were you just interviewing those from Arizona, or how did that go down for you?
Well, 2018 was the year after both Todd Graham and Rich Rodriguez left. So
Right.
I didn't write. I haven't written anything exclusively about that game. I mean, I wrote something for ABC 15 afterwards.
Okay.
I was working for them at the time,
Hmm.
but no, I didn't. I haven't talked to players specifically about that game.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind doing that in the future. I mean, I don't know if we're going to have Edwards versus someone the way things are going in Tucson. It might be a pretty short book. Um, but I do remember, and this is something else I know we talked about before we started recording, was if you're an ASU fan, it was a great comeback. If you're a U of A fan, it was the ultimate collapse, right? It was the
Right.
ultimate choke job. And Arizona did get conservative in the fourth quarter, leading
Hmm.
big. And I remember the fifth straight play that Arizona ran the ball. It was over two possessions. It was the
Right.
second possession, second play of that possession, fifth play overall. They ran the ball up the middle again. And if you've ever heard 50,000 people collectively groan, because we were on the
Right.
field at that time. Last 5 minutes of the game, you can go. If you're a member of the media, you can go down on the field
Yes.
and observe from there, and then get some video and photos on the field after the game. So I remember being on the field and just hearing that and just that groan, like, are we really doing this? And it's
Right.
one of the funny things, the difference between McHale Center and Arizona Stadium. McHale Center always has these positive vibes, like, how are we going to find a
Okay.
way to win this game? We're going to do it. We're
Gotcha.
going to win this game, because typically they do at McHale. Arizona Stadium, it's the opposite. It's how are we going to find a way to choke this game away? And I'm
Yeah.
telling you, every single U of A fan at that point was thinking, how are we going to do this? Why are we doing this?
Right.
Why are you doing this to us? And then, of course, if you're an ASU fan, it was a great comeback. It was the greatest comeback in Territorial Cup history, and
Yeah.
they definitely earned it. And even with all things going wrong, U of A still had a chance to win in the last second
They
field goal.
did, which was crazy.
They did. And Josh Pollock was the least of the reasons why Arizona lost that game.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
but yeah, it's funny. It's a matter of perspective, but it's just, I was a journalist. Obviously, I'm a U of A guy. I want to see
Of
Arizona win that
course.
game, but just seeing the video of Manny Wilkins, and Manny Wilkins is a guy I would just respect the hell out of. He's overcome so much.
He has.
See him go out as a winner, as a senior, celebrating with a cup. Even as a U of A guy, I can appreciate that and what it meant to him.
Well,
So
like you were saying, it's a story and happy ending for a person, regardless
yeah,
of what color their uniform they're wearing, right? And
right.
so that's and so I was kind of going down the path of that one about being about the 50,000 fans doing the collective groan when so I was at my parents' house, so we were there. I was down for the game, but I was just there to tailgate, and we went back to my parents' house and watched the end of that. And it was actually, there was my mom, my dad, and my cousin and a couple other cousins, all Arizona fans, and they're like, they were part of that collective groan. It was just like, I didn't hear 50,000, but it was five of them in
Yeah.
my parents' house, and it was
Multiply that by about 10,000. That's what it was like.
exactly. And so now the game tomorrow, right? Both
Fingers crossed we have one.
Yes,
As of now,
exactly.
it's still on the
So
schedule.
far, it still is. Both teams winless. Someone tweeted this, and I couldn't look it up. I'm imagined that there was a game when both teams had losing records, but I don't think there's ever been a game where they both were winless.
Thought up until today that the last time that happened was in 1937, and that was only because it was the first game of the year for both teams.
Oh,
There was a
okay.
story that in the Daily Star that Greg Hansen wrote today that actually, I think he said it was actually 46, where I think one of the team or the other had a game before, then they lost that game, and then they played each other.
Oh,
So it might have been
interesting.
46. So I'm not 100% clear on that. He's done more research on individual games that far back than I have.
Okay.
But suffice it to say, it's been a long time. It's been a long time, and certainly since it's been the last game or close to the last game of the season, it's never happened as far as I know.
So if we're looking at 47, it's at least, what are we looking at? 60, 70, 80?
73 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, and in the previous millennia, in the mid 1900s. So, I mean, that's even further away. So that's wild.
Yeah, I would say though, I think I tweeted after the ASU lost to UCLA. I don't think all winless teams are created equal. I mean, ASU is a better team. Let's just be,
Okay.
Arizona is about where people thought they would be. They're 0-4. They were competitive in a couple games, got blown out in a couple of games. I mean, ASU, they've played 2 games with a 4-week gap in between,
Right.
and they looked rusty last weekend. You would expect them to. So they're better than their limited record shows. So, I think ASU matches up well with them in terms of the running game, in
Okay.
terms of despite all the innovations in college football and pro football, football is still a simple game, right? You win the battle in the trenches,
Yep.
you win the turnover battle, you're going to win 99% of the time.
Yep.
And ASU, I think, has the advantage going in both of those categories. Can Arizona win? Absolutely, especially if Grant Cannell happens to play quarterback.
Right.
Absolutely, Arizona can win that game.
That was
But
going to,
ASU, go ahead.
it's exactly what I was going to ask. Is that like, does it really matter that ASU is more talented or whatever it may be, right? Does it really matter tomorrow?
Well, I think it always does. It's just a
Okay.
matter of how of the is just the execution. You can be more talented. It doesn't matter if you don't execute. Look back to the '80s, the streak with Arizona. I
Yeah.
mean, ASU was a better team going in on paper and record more often than not. U of A knocked them out of the Rose Bowl twice. They beat them in '86 on their way to the Rose Bowl. So
Right.
it doesn't. matter. But you look at the fact that Colorado had a 300-yard rusher against U of A last weekend, and ASU has a couple of very talented young rushers.
Yes.
They have a good pass rush, and Arizona, for the life of them, cannot pick up the blitz.
Mm,
So I think those combinations, I know you kind of throw logic out the window with this game,
yeah.
but that's all we have right now, right? So trying to look at it
Right.
objectively, I think if Grant Goodell plays, Arizona's got a decent shot. I put their odds maybe like probably like 2-1 in favor of ASU.
Okay.
If he doesn't play, if Will Plummer's the quarterback or Rhett Rodriguez or whoever, then it's probably like more like 4 or 5 to 1
Right.
to ASU, just because I think Grant Gunnell might be able to handle ASU's blitz, do some quick passes like a
Right.
jailbreak screen, be able to run the ball. Arizona's got a couple of great running backs with Gary Brightwell and Michael
Yes.
Wiley. They can match ASU on the ground. I just don't know. And Jaden Daniels doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He had a horrible throw against UCLA.
Hmm.
That's very unlike him. He's got the rust off now.
Right.
He's mature beyond his years. He doesn't make all the great throws. He's not the most accurate guy, but he's kind of like Manny Wilkins. He makes very few mistakes. I think
Exactly.
ASU is going to have to beat itself in
Like we
order
did
for
last
you.
week.
Yeah, well, it's possible, but I think it's like the last week of the NFL season. You need to win and get help in order to get into the playoffs. It's kind of like that. You guys
Okay.
have to play its best and get help from ASU in order to win.
we
Both things are possible.
exactly.
The only result that would surprise me is a U of A blowout win. I think
Mm,
ASU could win in a blowout. I think it could be a close game either way.
right.
But then again, 2016 U of A won in a blowout, so who knows?
Yeah, exactly. And then Grant Gunnell, is he more like Dorian Thompson Robinson from UCLA, where he's very mobile?
No, he's more of a pocket passer.
Okay.
He's more of a traditional pro style quarterback. He can run the ball a little bit. In fact, against USC, he actually did run the ball slowly, but he ran the ball
He
to
was
the
able
point
to.
to the point where USC actually began putting the spy on him in the
They
second
had
half.
to honor him. Yeah.
Yeah, so he can. He's just not very fast. He's willing to run the ball, but he's not. But he's best in the pocket. He's definitely
Okay.
more of a true pocket passer.
Got it. Okay. And so then, your prediction for tomorrow? Then, what kind of score prediction do you have for tomorrow?
I was trying to think of a score prediction. I feel like kind of like the way I did last year, where I thought ASU was going to win but not cover, and that's what
Oh,
happened. They
okay.
won by 10. I kind of feel the same way. I think ASU is definitely the favorite. Are they an 11.5 point favorite? Last I saw.
I can't believe that. That's
Well,
so,
I mean, they could certainly win by that or more. I just surprised that they're favored by that much.
especially down there. I mean,
Yeah, well, maybe
interesting.
the fact they don't have any fans definitely makes a difference. But Arizona has definitely played better at their two games at home
Yes, absolutely.
than on the road, so I think that's going to help. I do think all the criticism of Kevin Sumlin, a lot of it's fair. I do think he takes this rivalry seriously. He has guys. He's had Chuck Cecil and other guys come back and talk to the
Okay.
team speak
Cool.
about it. So I don't think all the criticism of him. I don't think that's one area the Arizona fans need to be concerned about. If they lose, it's just going to be because ASU is a better team, not because of the passion and willingness to
Right.
go all out and win this game. But I don't know about a score prediction, but I think ASU wins in the 7 to 10 point range. I think
Okay.
that's most realistic.
And then, how are you covering the game? Are you just watching it for like TV, like a bunch of like everyone else?
Yeah, we'll watch it on TV. We're going to do a live stream if you want to get the U of A perspective. If
Sure.
ASU wins, you want to see a couple of U of A fans vent after and talk about how Someone needs to be fired. Come watch us afterwards on a Wildcat Country live stream. But we've done that after every game.
Okay.
I think U of A fans are tired of seeing our faces because if they're seeing our faces, that means it was after a loss,
Oh,
and it might be
interesting.
again tomorrow because they haven't won a game.
what
Um, but
what platform
yeah,
do you
we'll
use
be
for that, by the way?
StreamYard.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, we're on Twitter and Facebook. So yeah, we use StreamYard. We use their like their entry level service, and it works really well. And we had a U of A alum, former football player, come on and join us last
Oh,
time.
right on.
We probably aren't going to do that tomorrow, but we'll be talking about the game, win or lose.
Excellent. No, I want to get on StreamYard as well because I have some friends on the Cal side, great guys, and so
Mm.
they've also said do StreamYard. It seems to be a lot more stable than Streamlabs, so that's why I'm actually able to excited to move over there as well. So excited. So Wildcat Country is one of them, and then what are some of the other podcasts, and what else would you like to promote? Have everyone else be part of?
We'll be on the books, just the Wildcat Country podcast. I don't know how thrilled this audience is going to be, but we did talk to Rich Rodriguez and Scooby Wright a couple
Yep.
days ago. So if you're interested in getting their perspective on some of those games,
That looked like a lot of fun, by the way.
it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of because we're just like it's not like an interview. We're just chatting,
Yeah.
and that's what makes the best interviews, really. But we reminisced about those games, and then talked about what's going wrong with Arizona. They've lost 11 in a row. What's going wrong? And so they had some opinions about that as well. So if
Yep.
you want to get that perspective going into the game, you're certainly welcome to do that. But you want to follow us and antagonize us, you got Cat Country AZ on Twitter. We're on Facebook too. Come join us. Come gloat if your Sun Devils win, and we might, I don't know, we might acknowledge the comments. We might not, depending on how we feel.
Exactly. I don't blame you. I don't blame you as well. But I appreciate you. I cannot thank you enough for sharing your insights. Time always goes by so quick. But again,
Yeah.
thank you for, just carving out some time for me and for the fans and everyone else that's been on. So
Jedi, anytime, my friend. I appreciate it. Good catching up. Good seeing your face. And
absolutely good
best
seeing
team
you.
win tomorrow, and everyone stay healthy.
That's the key. It's like as long as everyone has fun and everyone stays healthy,
I just want everyone to have fun. That's all.
that's it. Put it
I
on
just
a
want
shirt,
everyone to have
man.
fun tomorrow.
Excellent. Stay on the Zoom real quick. I'm going to sign off real quick, and then we'll catch up real. So thanks
All
again.
right. So
Everyone, we have a virtual tailgate tomorrow starting at 2 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to go ahead and just hang out, talk about the game last weekend. We got Brandon McGee join us, and then Gus Farwell joined us towards the end of it during the game. So all the way from Spain. So it was always good to get their insight and just chat and drink and moan and cheer all at the same time. So if you'd like to go ahead and DM me your email address, either on Twitter or Instagram, or even just shoot me an email, jediasu@gmail.com, and I will go ahead and add you to that invite, and we will talk more tomorrow. And as always, thank you again for spending some of your evening with me and my guest, Shane Dale. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate you. But as always, everyone, thank you for being part of this. I love you. Again, I do this for you, looking forward to building community and always being part of your day. Make sure you love yourself as always, and most importantly, nowadays, love those around you. And as always, most importantly, no matter the time of day or where you're at, be sure that you continue to stay social. Good night, everyone, and thanks again.